Hey there! Let's talk a little bit about operators and how they work in JavaScript. Before starting, once again, I'm going to comment out this code that we don't need anymore, but that I don't want to delete, so I can give you this final file in the end so that you can download it and take a look at everything for yourself. So once again, I'm going to also write a comment to say what this lecture will be about. So operators. And give it some space down here. Okay, so we can create as many empty lines as we want. It's no problem. Alright, so we already did use the plus operator before. So let's now use simply the minus operator. And we do this to calculate the birth year of John in this case. So let's create a variable called birth year. And in order to find out when someone was born, we just subtract the age of that person from the year. So we're now in 2016. So we do 2016 minus the age, which is 26. And now if we log this, of course, we will see when John was born. Alright, so 1990. Okay, so let's add another operator to this. And I'm actually going to do it right here. So then we don't have to write this console log line all the time. So I'm going to define another value for the birth year variable. So I'm going to mutate it. And we do it like this, as you remember. So let's say 2016 minus 26 times 2. So imagine that John was not 26, but 26 times 2. And actually, before taking a look at this, you see that we're repeating something here, right? So we have 2016 here and here. So what should we do about this? So I'm sure that you remember that variables are like containers for storing a variable that we're going to use over and over again. And that's the case here with this 2016 number. So we will just go ahead and create a variable called now and define it as 2016. And we can then go ahead and replace all of the 2016s with now. So let's see what happens then. Alright, so we have 1964. So what happens here is that JavaScript first does this multiplication here, so 2 times 26, and then subtracts the result of that operation from 2016, which is now. So it first does this operation and then the second part of the operation, which is simply, and let's write this as a comment, 2016 minus 52, which is 26 times 2. So the final result of this is then 1964. So why does JavaScript first make this operation and then the second part of the operation? And this has to do with the precedence of operators. So in JavaScript we have something called operator precedence, which is something that defines which operators are executed first and which ones are executed later. Of course, in this scenario it's easy to know which one it will be operated first, because that's simple math. So we know from our math class probably that the multiplication always comes before the subtraction. But there are a lot of operators in JavaScript, and we don't always know which ones are executed first. So we need something like a cheat sheet. And there is actually a great operator precedence table which helps us with that, and I'm going to show it to you. So I will just open the resource page that I have for this course and for my other courses, and where you can find great links like this one. So it's codingheroes.io/resources. Let me actually increase this. So we scroll all the way here to JavaScript, and then we have this link here. By the time you're visiting this page, there are probably already a lot more resources here, but for now it just looks like this. So we can just click here on the operator precedence table. And here it is. This is just an article basically on the MDN reference. which by the way is an excellent reference. So if you ever need some detail about something, to Google something about JavaScript, the MDN reference will be an excellent place for you to find this. Okay, so down here is the table, and in this table we can see all the operators as well as their precedence. And there's also something called associativity, and what this means is that when there are two operators with the same precedence, then in which direction they are executed. So many of them are right to left, but there are also some which are left to right, like here. All right, but now we were talking about multiplication and subtraction. So where do we find this? So here we have the multiplication down here, which has a precedence of 14. And down here we have the subtraction, which has a precedence of 13. So, and basically the higher the precedence value here, the higher is their priority. So operators with a higher precedence are executed first. And that explains why the multiplication was executed first, and then after that was the addition. Now, if we had, for example, multiple additions and subtractions, which all have the same precedence of 13, then these would simply be executed from left to right. Alright, there are a lot of operators here, as you can see, and don't worry, we will actually see many of them in action later on. But for now, I just need you to know that this table exists and that it can be very useful. And down here you will actually see that this assignment operator, which is simply the equal, is also an operator. So it's an operator that we have been using all the time, simply to assign values to variables. And since it has a low precedence, it's usually the last one to be executed. So let's go back to our code and to our page. So as I was saying, the equal operator is also an operator, which is of course the last one. So first we do this calculation, which is 52, and then it's 2016 minus 52, which is 1964, and then the last thing is to assign this value to the birth year variable, which then gets printed as 1964. So let's now play around a little bit more with these operators, have some more fun with these. So I will define two variables called age of John and say that he's 30 years old, and age of Mark, also say that he's 30. And now I will calculate the age of John in a different way. So I will just say 3 plus 5 times 4 minus 6. So how would this be executed? First, this one will happen, so 5 times 4, because it's multiplication, which has a higher precedence than the plus and the minus. And then the remaining two operations would be executed. Now imagine that I wanted to change that. And once again, I'm sure that you know from your math classes that in order to do that, we use parentheses, just like this. So now the first thing will be 3 plus 5, and then the remaining operations will be executed. And why is that? Once again, let's go to our operator precedence table, and here we will see that the first operator in the priority is the grouping, so using parentheses. So always, no matter what, if we group something together like this, it will always be the first thing to be executed. So in this case, the first thing will be 3 plus 5, which is 8, and then times 4, 32, minus 6, 26. Probably, I guess. So let's just log this. Age John. And let's see. Alright, so 26, as I was saying. And we can actually do something else here. Because knowing that the equal operator has the lowest precedence of all, or almost at all, we can do something else, which is define John's and Mark's age here at the same time. So we can say John and age mark equals this. So what will happen? All of these operators will be executed first. So in the end, we only have something like this. So I will write it here in a comment again. It's just to illustrate how this looks like. So in the end, all we have is this mark equals 26. And in order to understand what happens now, I will once again look at the precedence table, because we have here two equal operators. So we need to know which one is executed first, because they have the same precedence, but we need to know which one will be executed first. And remember, that's what the associativity is for. Here it is. So these are operated from right to left. So starting at 26 equals age mark. So what we have then is age John equals 26. And then finally, the h1 variable is assigned this 26. So let's see if this is actually true. So age mark, let's print it out in the console. And alright, so they're both 26. Now, if this would be evaluated not from right to left, but from left to right, it would be all different, right? Because then the first thing to execute would be age John equals age mark. And since these are 30 here in the beginning, I defined them as 30, then age John would be 30. Okay, and just to finish, I just want to show you two other interesting mathematical operators here, which are right here in the table, and they can be pretty useful, which is this one here, and also the increment operator. So we know that right now the age of John is 26, right? So we can confirm this here. So if we now do something like this, plus plus, then what this does is to simply add 1 to the age of John. So let's actually put this here so that we don't have to write it all over again. So age of John should now be 27. So the first one here. So this is basically the same as writing age John equals age John plus 1. Actually, I forgot the semicolon here. So now it will be 28, right? Okay. So this is the same as this. And this will be useful for something called loops that we will talk about later. And now just something else which is actually similar to this, and we will do this with the age mark. So age mark, then multiplication equals 2. And what this does is that it takes the age of mark and simply multiplies it by 2. So we should have 2 times 26 now, which is 52. And here we go. Great. So this is the same thing as writing age mark equals age mark times 2. So these are just some operators which allow us to write less code. And once again, there are a lot of different operators, and we will use many of them throughout the course. But for now, I just wanted to show you what operators are and how they work and how we can determine their precedence, which is something that can confuse new students. But now it will not confuse you anymore, right? Okay, so see you in the next lecture.